three things. So keep your eyes tuned for that. Maybe check my Twitter feed. You'll get to see what hour I'm going to be present on that program tomorrow. And welcome into the show. Thank you for being here. I want to say a special thanks to those who've been reaching out to me about the re-air that we have on 60 inspo stations on American Family Radio. That is awesome. It's good to know that you guys are listening over there. And for people who are saying, oh, this is the only time we can hear you. We want earlier in the day, another timing. Listen, pray about that. That's not up to me, but I'm grateful for what we have. And that is fantastic that you guys are listening. And welcome into everyone else who's listening via live stream, Facebook, YouTube, people who are tuning in on terrestrial radio stations across the country. And then also everyone else from everywhere else who are tuned in via the app and the podcast listeners on iTunes and Google Play. So today on the program, we have pretty full lineup for you. It's FISA again today. And then, of course, the Dow Jones is on the move, as you just heard Mark Cuban talking to Neil Cavuto. And that's an interesting kind of, what should we call it? A wrinkle or development, or just another thing for us to kind of look at and absorb in a fast-paced, quick news cycle that we have, that it's less than 24 hours now that the news changes over and completely the conversation is shifted. And so today's guests, we also have Monica Crowley, and we're going to be speaking with Jeremiah Poff, contributor to the College Fix and Red Alert Politics. And so we're going to catch up with the two of them, Monica in hour 1 and Jeremiah in hour 2. And then you, the listeners, please feel free to call in. Love to chat with you. 866-963-2037. We'll have some time today during the program to catch up with our callers and just have them weigh in on the program. So on the stock market thing, I just want to point out a bit of it's a double standard, obviously. When the market was roaring, it was Obama's doing. It was things that President Obama did that made the market so sweet and so nice now. And then now that we've had a little drop, we've had some correcting going on, some profit taking, if you will, then now that's Trump's fault. So people in the middle of the night were thinking, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to sell my position. I'm going to change my position on these different stocks. I'm going to make some changes in my portfolio. And I'm doing that because Donald Trump told me to. He told me to tank the stock market. And so that's what I'm going to do. Do we really think that's what happened? I'm pretty sure that's not what happened. So yeah, we're going to give credit to him for the market shifting in a positive direction. We're also going to say that if people decide to take some profits off of that, a record stock market means people who bought low can now sell high. And if you're planning on doing that because you have things happening, specifically people who are in the kind of group that we're in, where you've got kids going to college in the next year or so, you're wanting to change your position on some things to open up some liquidity. For people who are going into retirement, they're wanting to shift more into cash so that there's less volatility in the stable amount that they need in order to live out their retirement years. And for anybody in between who was in the market and now sees an opportunity to take some of their profits so that they can spend money on something that they really need, new house, new car, vacation, or paying off bills, investing in a business, whatever the case might be, market volatility is actually the norm. It is not normal to only have consistent, raises in the stock market and it going up and up and up and up and never ever correcting, never ever having people taking profits. So this is a normal occurrence. It is the norm. It has happened much more often than these more stable times of late, where we've seen nothing but increases. And so there's really no reason to start a fire sale or get a whole bunch of pennies and put them under your pillow. There's no reason to get upset at this moment. I also want to give a bit of an update on there's the new memo. So you may have heard that the Democrats have now issued their own 10-page memo, and it was unanimously voted out of the House. All the Democrats and the Republicans said, sure, let everybody look at the Democrats' memo. Now, their memo is sure to be the one that is read word for word on all of the major news outlets, because their memo is going to completely be the opposite of the memo that Nunes issued. Now, as far as credibility is concerned, they just threw this memo together recently. The Nunes memo has been there for months and months and months. So I think the interesting part of all of this is that the Democrats want both memos to have the same gravitas, and I just don't see it. I don't see it happening. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. We're gonna see what they actually decide to do. But you know, there it is. They're gonna have their memo out that, and it's gonna be up to the president whether or not he objects to, you know, the issuing of the final issuing of the memo. So earlier we had Judge Napolitano giving some, you know, a commentary, if you will, about this issue, the intelligence community, the kind of back and forth between the intelligence community and President Trump, and whether or not there's like an animus there. And so I think it bears saying that if you have some kind of upset surrounding how the dossier, which was opposition research and completely unverified and unsourced, how that information was reworked into information that was submitted to the FISA court that then became actionable intel. If you're concerned about that, it doesn't mean that you think every single member of the CIA or the FBI or the DOJ or our intelligence community is corrupt. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that certain individuals took extraordinary measures in order to get surveillance access to surveil certain Americans. So that fault lies with those individuals and anyone who approved it. So it really looks like it stinks from the head. You've got Barack Obama, Loretta Lynch, Hillary Clinton. You've got those individuals playing in this scene. And then you have the individuals who were at the FBI at the time, who were in leadership, who repetitively used the same information, even after it was ruined by it's Steele. His last name's Steele. By Steele going out into the journalistic community and offering all of these viewpoints about how he wanted Hillary to be the president. We heard yesterday, right here on the show, that once you go out to the media, you cease to be a good source for the FBI. So they're not interested in you anymore after that. So the question is, you know, how do they justify this? And will the underlying documents that were used to support the dossier and the requests themselves to the FISA court, will those things be made available to the public so we can see the complete chain of events? How did it all unfold? So we'll see if they actually allow us to go that far into it and for the American people to fully understand just how the FISA court was abused, how the process was manipulated, and who did the abusing and manipulating. So Judge Napolitano wants to fight fire with fire, and he says he wants President Trump to release the Schiff FISA memo because he thinks it will drive the intel community crazy. Now, I'm not particularly interested in driving the intel community crazy. I'm interested in getting to the bottom of things and hearing the truth. So to quote Judge Napolitano, he says, I hope he releases it because it will show who's spinning, who's exaggerating. And this was on Fox and Friends this morning. It will also show raw intelligence. There's everything in there. If you like Donald Trump, you're going to find some stuff in there. If you don't like Donald Trump, you're going to find some stuff in there. So the pressure, once this memo comes out, the pressure will build for the raw intelligence on which the Republican memo is based and on which the Democratic memo is based to come out, which will send the intelligence community through the roof because this stuff is never made public. Now, I guess it's kind of one of those things where we say, is it something that should be made public every single time? Possibly not. But if there's been malfeasance, absolutely. If people have done things wrong and now we need to understand how they were able to manipulate the process to do that so we can ensure it doesn't happen again, then yes, the information needs to come out. So the raw intelligence, according to Judge Knapp, would include any recordings, messages, information intercepted by the intelligence community. And he believes it would be unprecedented for the public to learn how these agencies gather data. So how much more can there be? We already know that they save all of the metadata. So every phone call, every text, every tweet, every communication, anything that makes a little electronic spark that travels through all of the, magic wires and imaginary clouds and goes from one place to another, they're saving the metadata on all of that. They're also saving all the stuff like the archives of your email messages sent and received, all of that stuff. So if we know they're gathering all of that, there must be other ways that they're gathering things that we are not aware of. So I saw a piece earlier about how they're allowed to come into your home without letting you know and put in devices to listen, I guess, to your live conversation, whatever can't be picked up on these devices because you're not talking on the phone. And maybe you have your phones off, maybe you have your laptop powered off and you're still talking. And I would wonder how they're able to go into people's homes without having a warrant, but that's what was alleged. So Judge Napolitano asked a few questions as he was closing out the segment. What does raw intelligence consist of? And then he talks about digital recordings of telephone conversations, copies of text messages, copies of emails, any kind of fiber optic information that was transmitted, that was captured by the intelligence communities. The intelligence communities, which exist to preserve national security, don't want the public or the bad guys to know the nature and extent of what they capture and download. If these raw materials come out, we will know that. So I happen to be someone who believes in giving our government as much ammo as they need in order to catch the bad guys. But I also believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And then when we find out that our same government agencies that have been given this largesse and this trust have abused it, then you have to do the equal measure of the equal measure of trust that you've given. You have to then give the equal measure of investigation and movement towards finding out what happened. And this is an accountability process that should be respected and really supported by the Democrats as well as the Republicans. And I'll tell you why. Because this can go both ways. There are two sides to every coin, and there are two directions that this type of behavior can go in every situation. And so when it is the Democrats' turn to be elected to the presidency and to have their candidate, the president-elect, and to have their candidate preparing to take the reins of an administration, I believe the Democrats would not just be upset, but they would be raging mad. They'd be ready to burn cities to the ground and set police cars on fire. They'd be ready for snipers to get up on roofs in Dallas and shoot police down to the ground. They'd be ready for all of their Antifa minions to turn this place into an anarchist pit if they thought they had been treated this way. But do you see the difference there? Not a lot of caring when it's a Republican who's under the knife, who's under the gun. So, check yourself. It'll be your turn. If they get away with it, if no one is prosecuted, then next time it will be Democrats who are being treated this way. That's human nature. So that's the music. When we get back, we'll have more Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk. Stay right there.
in over my head. Help me to look up.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I would love your feedback on, first of all, did you get your mug? I need to check my little tracking mechanisms to make sure that everyone who ordered mugs last year actually received them. They've all been mailed out. So I hope you're enjoying those. And then I'd love to know what you think of the newly revamped Stacy on the Right Show weekly newsletter format that we're doing to keep you updated on posts to the website. So if you email me back or possibly call into the show and talk about what you think of the newsletter. I did that myself. That was my little work on my little app that I have that I make little graphics with. So let me know what you think about that. And then I want to just have a moment, give you guys a chance to call in. We have 866-963-2037. Those are the call lines if you'd like to call in and join the program. Also, I'd love to hear what you guys thought about the program that we did last week, where that was the broadcast after we went to the program. Jason, she says you can try her now. We're still trying to get our guest for this segment as well. And I just got a text from Demetrius. He says, "Oh yeah, give one more call, please." So yeah, we had pretty interesting. I was on NRA TV this morning discussing that visit last week and getting a chance to go there and to do that wonderful series of interviews at the Eisenhower Office Complex. And then there's sad news. So you guys remember, or you might have seen me yesterday on Cam and Company on NRA TV. And I was talking about the fact that during the Super Bowl, I watched a bunch of Frasier reruns. And it just so turns out that yesterday, the actor who played the dad on Frasier, Martin Crane, he just passed away. He was 77 years old. And so I'm super sad to hear that, because he was such a great, his character, I loved his character on Frasier. He was the dad, he was the rough and gruff cop, and it was a really awesome portrayal. He really played that role well, of a man who had two sons who are nothing like him, and he just couldn't figure out how to deal with them and the relationship issues that they had. So anyway, it's my pleasure to welcome author and Fox News contributor and all-around wonderful person, Monica Crowley, to Stacy on the Right. Monica, thank you so much for coming on today.
Hi, Stacy. So happy to be here. Thank you so much.
You know, I'm just dying to know what you think, with your background, with everything that you've learned and all of the things that you've interacted with as it pertains to the intelligence community and Washington, D.C. and politics. I'm just dying to hear what you have to say about this, the continuing saga of the Russia, collusion, obstruction, which is now turned into Democrats and FISA.
Yeah, you know, with every passing day, Stacy, we seem to learn more and more about this horrifying story, and it looks increasingly like the deep state, in conjunction with the Hillary Clinton campaign, in conjunction with the DNC, in conjunction with perhaps, well, we know major members of the Obama team, his FBI director, his attorney general, all the way down, perhaps even folks in the Obama White House, that they were all essentially conspiring to do two things. One, to protect Hillary Clinton from the range of felonies that she committed with her illegal and unapproved email server. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, they were also working to undermine candidate Donald Trump, and then once he was elected president, then President-elect Donald Trump. And from what we see, their efforts continue. They continue to try to undermine, if not straight up destroy this man and his presidency. This, to me, Stacy, and I worked with President Nixon in the last years of his life, former President Nixon. This, to me, having known what I've known over the years about Watergate from President Nixon and history, etc., this, to me, is the most dangerous scandal in American history. I used to think that the Obama administration's use of the IRS, their weaponizing of the IRS to target conservatives, religious folks, other people who may have opposed their agenda, I used to think that was the most dangerous scandal. Now I believe this is, because our top law enforcement agencies, the FBI and the Department of Justice, which are supposed to be blind, equal application of the law, those things were weaponized against political opponents, which frankly makes Watergate look like a game of tiddlywinks. And I think we have just scratched the surface, Stacy. In fact, a number of my contacts and my sources are telling me that first Devin Nunes memo, that's a very small portion of what we're about to get. So this scandal is only going to get deeper and more profound and more catastrophic, I think, for the country going forward.
And so I love your analysis. Everybody, if you're just tuning into the program, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm speaking with Monica Crowley, who is an expert in these areas. And really, you have a kind of a back channel that really it's enviable. Anyone would love to have that. And so with that information that you have access to, you're able to kind of get a more nuanced approach to this entire story. And so I'm just as concerned as you are that people aren't taking this seriously enough. And so that brings us to this new Democratic drafted memo. Theirs is 10 pages. They're dying to get it out. What can we expect there?
Well, my understanding, Stacy, is that the so-called Schiff memo that they're going to try to use to counterbalance the Nunes memo, that they take issue with some of the processes, et cetera, but they don't take issue with a lot of the, or any of the meat in the actual Nunes memo about how the FBI behaved, how the DOJ behaved, how the FISA court was not alerted to the fact that Hillary Clinton and the DNC had paid for the political dirt on which the FISA warrant was based. So the court wasn't aware of that. So my understanding is that the Democratic memo is not going to take issue with any of those things because it can't, because everything Nunes laid out is in fact true. This is just their attempt to try to spin this and regain control of the narrative. Look, the bottom line, Stacy, is that none of these people, from President Obama to James Comey to Loretta Lynch to Strzok to Page to any of these people, none of them thought in their wildest dreams that Donald Trump would be elected and Hillary would lose. Therefore, they thought all of the evidence of this would be shredded and destroyed and lost to history forever, and that they'd never be caught. Well, Trump was elected. They are being caught. And what you're seeing is a slow-motion train wreck. But the thing about it is that, and everybody needs to understand this, whether you voted for Donald Trump or not, he is the duly elected president of the United States. And what was done to him by political opponents is not only highly illegal, but grossly unconstitutional. And the idea that so many people, like you said, are sort of not taking this seriously or not quite paying attention, it's because so many people who hate Donald Trump and are consumed with that hatred believe that by all means necessary he must be removed. So the first attempt was to try to stop him from being elected. Mm-hmm. Well, he got elected. The second attempt was to try to undermine him during the transition. That failed. And now they continue to try to undermine him in order to try to remove him from office. So they believe that the illegal weaponization of the FBI and the DOJ was all in service of a higher goal, saving the country from Donald Trump.
Okay, so we've discussed that a little bit here, Monica, and I've actually, there's been some days where I've giggled with incredulity, and other days where I've been really, it's perturbing. It makes you feel as if you're living in one of those weird Twilight Zone episodes where everything that shouldn't be able to happen is happening, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Or a weird dream where weird things happen and you know that they're not possible in real life, but in the dream they're happening and you can't stop them until you wake up. So here, I guess the bigger overarching concept that I think the Democrats are missing here, and their short-sightedness is really indicative of who they are, is, Monica, let's talk about this. We're adults here. If they don't actually submit to the rule of law and the processes that we have in place, is it not possible that an incoming Democratic administration could have the same type of thing happen to them? The weaponization of the DOJ and the FBI, the FISA court subverted and used in order to kind of prevent actual things that are due processes like the Electoral College from occurring. Could this not come back on them?
That's a very good question, and that's why, Stacy, I keep saying that this is the most dangerous scandal in U.S. history. Because if this kind of thing could be designed and directed against Donald Trump and members of his team, then certainly the case that you lay out, where Democrats could be subjected to this by some unscrupulous person somewhere down the line. But even more dangerous is that it could happen to you and me. And it could happen to every single person listening to us today. If there are no safeguards, if there are no civil liberties, if the IRS can be weaponized against you because of your political beliefs, and the DOJ and the FBI, which has the ability to take away your freedom, to put you in handcuffs and march you off to federal prison. I mean, that kind of government power, there are checks and balances that the founders put into place, and that over the years, that all kinds of statutory limitations have been put in place to prevent those kind of abuses. And here we are, the Obama team, like, oh, do-de-do, we're going to do this because we hate Trump and we need to get Hillary elected, and we got to remove this guy because he's such a danger. No, you know what that is, Stacy? That is projection. The left is so good at projection. They accuse the other side of what they themselves are guilty of. So when they say Donald Trump is dangerous and he's a demagogue and he acts like a dictator, guess what? What they're telling you is, no, we're the ones who are a danger to you. We've been acting like dictators. We're the ones instituting the police state. So every time you hear the Democrats and the left accuse Republicans, conservatives, Donald Trump of something, just be really clear that what they're actually doing is giving you a tell. They're telling you what they themselves are guilty of.
Okay, so we have a unimind on that, because I've said the same exact thing. They actually will tell you what they're up to if you're listening, because whatever they're accusing you of, that's what they're presently working on or doing or have done recently. So let's go back to something that, and I want your opinion on this, because I know you know the actual answer here. I've just been supposing, but it is my thought that the reason why we haven't seen the prosecution of Hillary Clinton on the email scandal, the reason why FBI Director Comey at the time and others, Ray, all the ones who had anything to do with it, Lynch, why they were so careful to make sure that she wasn't prosecuted for her wrongdoing is because President Obama at the time knew she was emailing him from an insecure server. And so part of the culpability belongs to him. And there's no way they're going to allow the first black president to be prosecuted for an email scandal or anything, really. There's nothing he can do that they would want to prosecute him for, because it tarnishes their legacy. Is that the case? Is that the reason why they're so careful not to prosecute her on what she did with the email?
Yes, twofold, and that's a great point. My friend Andy McCarthy has been writing a lot about this in National Review. I'm sure that you've read it too, Stacy. And he actually laid this out probably, about 2 years ago now, that Barack Obama as president was emailing Mrs. Clinton to her private email address on a private email server. And the theory is that he was knowingly doing that he knew she wasn't on a state.gov email address. She was on a private email address. He actually was on some sort of email address that also was not government, because he was, or at least was an anonymous name, which I understand if you're the president, but he was going under another name, emailing her back and forth. Now, obviously, if you're the president and you're emailing your Secretary of State, you're obviously not emailing about yoga schedules and Chelsea's wedding, okay? Obviously, there's classified information going back and forth between the two of them. So Andy's point, and this is what you're getting at, and I think it's right on and gets to the root of so much of this, is that the reason they couldn't prosecute Hillary is because if they did, then they'd have to prosecute Barack Obama. Okay. So if Hillary were guilty of using private email address and blocking her emails from federal records keeping and using the email server against the law, etc., and the president was doing it knowingly as well, if she's guilty, he's guilty. And so in order to protect him, they had to protect her. And this is such a critical part of this whole equation. There was no love lost between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton especially, I mean, they did not like each other very much. They made a marriage of convenience there. So there was no real incentive to protect her, except in order to protect him.
Okay, so So right on that one, and not often that I get to be of the same mind as Mr. McCarthy over at NRO. So that's fantastic. So everyone, if you're just tuning in, speaking to Monica Crowley, good friend of mine and of the Stacy on the Right show, really fantastic to have you here and to have a little bit of your time. We have just a minute left, and I just want to kind of get you to telegraph what you think. What do you see happening next? Because I believe President Trump he's going to insist on due process occurring here because he's not guilty of collusion. He's not guilty of trying to materially impact the election. So what are the next steps that we may see happening coming on the heels of the release of the Democrat side of this thing?
Yes, well, I'm not sure about the Mueller side of the investigation. That is ongoing. I don't think that's going to stop. But as you say, there was no collusion and there was no obstruction. So where he's going with that, I don't know. I will tell you that the Inspector General for the Department of Justice is working on a report. That report is due in early spring, so a couple of weeks away. And that is going to blow everything wide open because that Inspector General is nonpartisan, and he, for over a year, has been digging into the FBI and the DOJ's handling of Hillary's email server, the email situation, and everything else. Page and Strzok, those Page and Strzok lovers' texts, we got that because that's a leak from the Inspector General's investigation. So that will be the next major thing to blow up.
Oh, my goodness. You are amazing, as always. Thank you so much for coming on today. Hope to talk to you again soon. Monica Crowley, author, Fox News contributor, good friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Talk again soon. That is a wrap for that segment. We'll be back with more Stacy on the Right after these messages. Stay there.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winner
government, like Abraham Lincoln said.
To undermine our democracy.
And by the way, guess what? Guess what? It goes back to money. Why doesn't Kamala Harris want to come on our show? And we're so glad she did. But why wasn't she aggressively going after Facebook and Twitter and tech companies? Because she represents them. She's in California. She represents them. And if she's going to run for president, this, by the way, applies to everybody running for president, not just her. You're not going to want to cross Facebook. You're not going to want to cross Twitter.
I don't think she'll have a problem.
You're not going to want to face Google. Yes, you will. Okay. Don't kid yourself. They all will. They all will have a trouble. And that's where we stand. I want to ask you before we go, Rick.
I think Mika was trying to say something there. What were you saying, Mika?
No, I just don't think Kamala Harris will have a hard time crossing Facebook and these companies when she is across the table from them. I think she's trying to work with them, which is why she wasn't strong on the show
I'm curious, did your earpiece go out? Did you not hear her say that before? I knew she was trying to say something, and she said it, and then I followed up. Hey, Alex? Alex?
Yeah.
Hey, is Rick's earpiece working?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, good. Thank God. So I can go to my next question to you. Before we go, Rick, I just have to ask you, and I'm worried about your earpiece because I want you to hear this next question.
Okay, so welcome back to the show, everybody. Call lines are open, 866-963-2037. Great interview with Monica Crowley last segment. Wonderful time for us to continue on, and we'll be getting back into that subject matter in just a second here. What you're listening to now is it's Morning Joe, and on Morning Joe, they have this this weird dynamic that's happening now. So when the relationship between Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough was less of a public thing. It was more like an open secret, but it wasn't openly discussed on the program. They had an interesting dynamic. Obviously, he puts it forward that it's his program, and she is a co-host of sorts, but not important enough to have equal speaking time as he has. So when he's hungover or he's, a little tired, she does more talking. But for the most part, he does the talking. And she does the hardcore, sipping of the drinks, which, I'm all for. I do that here on my program. But she also she'll weigh in, but sometimes she gets cut off. Now, that's their dynamic. It has been for years since they've been on the show together. But since they came out publicly with their relationship and they've begun to be seen out in public more frequently, and they've done things together, like that weird photo shoot with her legs up in the air and all that stuff, then the dynamic has shifted. And so in this particular instance, in that clip, you can hear them. So to set the scene, there's and I've already posted this on Twitter. So if you want to see it for yourself, just go to my Twitter feed at Stacy on the right and you'll see it. To set the scene, what she basically does is she's trying to cut in to give her opinion. And the only person that's on the panel who isn't in studio, which means unless they've got a special setup, normally when you remote into these television hits, you can't see the people that you're talking to. Sometimes they'll roll a television screen over and they'll have the scene as it's seen. So basically what the viewer can see will be on a huge 46-inch or 50-inch television. And that'll be right next to the huge television camera that's viewing you, that's remoting you into the scene. The problem is if it's the little tiny camera that's right underneath your camera, it basically creates a delay as the data from that stream comes back in through that camera and shares all of the lines. So usually they don't have that tiny screen below where you can see how you look. So if your shoulder's cockeyed, or if one of your eyes is bigger than the other, or if you're sitting crooked, whatever you're doing that you don't want to do, you can see it in that little camera. The problem with the big 50-inch television that they roll up is that you have a tendency to watch it because you can see everyone that you're talking to plus yourself. But that means in the camera lens, you're looking off to the side at that camera, which is the view of yourself, if you get my drift. So this gentleman is sitting, he's in the studio someplace else. He's not there where they're located. He's not on the panel. And there are some people sitting in the studio with Joe and Mika, and they've talked and she's talked, but she hasn't gotten her thought out. So he can hear it in his earpiece, because you have an earpiece on when you're remoting into these shows. And that's when it gets a little interesting, because Joe gets really, he gets ticked off when he gets called out on the fact that he cut Mika Brzezinski off. And she didn't get to finish her thought. She gets cut off by him and she didn't say anything. So you hear the awkward laughter from her. you hear Joe he's like, what? Is his earpiece working? Here's what's so interesting about the interchange. After they begin to go back and forth over whether or not she was able to say what she had to say, but the guest prompts this interaction, then Joe says, is his earpiece working? And the cameraman cuts to the control room. And you can see 4 people looking at multiple screens. They're the controllers of the show. They're deciding what shot you get to look at home on your television, whether you're looking at just Joe, just Mika, Joe and Mika, the whole group. They're basically choosing which camera is up next. And all of this is going on live on the air. So he says, is his earpiece working? And the producer says, yeah, it's working fine. It's a pretty amazing interchange between some people who they're having a conversation. So who are we talking about? We're talking about Rick. So you've got Rick Perlstein, and he's a guest. You've got Mika Brzezinski. You've got Joe Scarborough. And, all of this is going on live on their television show. So watch the link, tweet me back, tell me what you think about that. It was just one of those moments where as I'm going through and I'm pulling things to share on the show, and I'm watching this, and it's quite a large panel. They've got, 1, 2, 3, they've got 4 guests plus themselves, and then the guy on the remote feed. And his name, again, was Rick Perlstein. And Joe just got his backup. He was not excited about the fact that this Rick Perlstein had called him out on the fact that he cut Mika off. And so the clip is a lot longer than what you just heard there. There's some more in the beginning where they're actually having the discussion. And then it starts to get heated. You heard that. And then they kept on going. Like the cringe fest, as they're calling it on Mediaite, just kept on going. And Scarborough says, we just crossed a line. We haven't really done that since we've been engaged. Everyone has seen our grandparents kissing, and we understand that we're old people. Nobody wants to see that. Mika Brzezinski shouted, taking the Lord's name in vain. Don't do that, while crossing her arms. And after Joe noted that they're engaged, Mika insisted that he stop. And so then they kept on going back and forth like that until Brzezinski told Scarborough to wait until they're married before holding her hand on air. And then they tossed it to break. So I see it only getting weirder. And there's nothing wrong with husband-wife teams. I mean, there are plenty of them that I've seen that I've liked and enjoyed a great deal. TV and radio. That's not the issue. The issue is that the two of them are not completely simpatico on the politics. She's a leftist. He's a supposed Republican who has, as their relationship has progressed, he has drifted further and further to the left. But in all things, their dynamic is that he's in control. And he's the one with the last word. And he's the one who controls pretty much everything on the program. And she's an add-on. And so the fact that this guest called that out and made it kind of patently obvious that they don't have kind of an equal share type of a thing on the show. And then he kind of twisted it into, well, we're engaged and this and that. And he, tried to and he filibustered. I'm just saying, not everybody can work together. Not everybody can, have all the home stuff, do all the home stuff together, and then come into a stressful television type situation and work together and keep that up as well. Not everybody can do that. So, anyway, just a very interesting little dynamic there that I thought, you know what? Let's discuss it. Let's talk about that. So, back over to the whole FISA memo thing. So Carter Page is a name that has kind of come up, and now everyone's wondering, Carter Page, who is he? What's going on? And so the DOJ FISA Title I surveillance warrant was on Carter Page. Now, one of the things that came out just recently about Carter Page is that he used to be an FBI agent. So before he was, suspect numero uno for Russian, spying or whatever it is they think he was doing, he was actually a part of the FBI. So he went on Laura Ingraham and discussed exactly, well, I guess he's discussing whatever he's allowed to discuss. Who knows what? And while he was on, he talked about how he emailed FBI Director James Comey on September 25th, 2016, offering his help on any questions the FBI might have, and noted prior work with people within the FBI and intelligence community, which is approximately a month before the October 21st, 2016 FISA Title I application against him. So these things don't line up. He's a part of the FBI, then he's not. Then he's the subject of an investigation, and the information used to get the warrant is a opposition research dossier that the Clinton campaign paid $10 million for. I mean, you can see where Monica Crowley was just saying in the different, when we were talking with her, she was saying that this is a crisis for our country, because if this isn't adjudicated, if nothing is done about this, it puts you in a situation where anyone can have this done to them. If a dressed up opposition research document will do, then almost anything will do, right? Because not everyone's going to spend $10 million on some oppo research on a regular person. So that puts all the regular people in danger, but it also puts other elected officials in danger. So Carter Page also mentioned on the program that prior DOJ case that he was involved in against Evgeny Buryakov, described by the DOJ as an FBI undercover employee. In this interview, Carter Page described himself as a witness. So huge difference between subject of the investigation and witness. A witness is someone who's cooperating. The subject is someone who may or may not even be aware that they're under investigation, because the FBI doesn't have to tell you that they're investigating you until the first day after the 12th month that they've been investigating you. And then at that point, they have to tell you you are under investigation, or they have to stop investigating you. Do you see how that works? So it's interesting that he is now kind of out again, like, out and about talking, and that if he's the subject of this investigation, he hasn't been, apprised of his rights and arrested or arraigned. There's been no indictment. There have been no charges against him. So if he was truly the object of the investigation, and President Trump and others in Trump world were caught up in it accidentally because they communicated with him because he was like a little low-level advisor on the Trump campaign, then something stinks. Something doesn't make sense. So there's that. And then there's, other people have gone on to the shows and talked a little bit. You had Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes appearing on Fox News. And there's some of the shows, like there's a couple of the shows where I don't do audio from those because the host interrupts so much that you can't get good, clean audio for us to listen to and kind of garner what the conversation was about or to gather new information. And so there's also a memo from FBI Director Wray, and Chuck Grassley has given him until today to declassify his memo. And that response date was today. And so this was reporting from late yesterday. The Federal Bureau of Investigation signed off on an unclassified version of the criminal referral by the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley and Crime and Terrorism Subcommittee Chairman Lindsey Graham, only after the White House declassified a House Intelligence Majority memo largely based on the same underlying documents. Grassley is now calling on the FBI to update the classification of the referral to allow complete disclosure of important context from the documents on which it is based. And so that the plot thickens. Really, the plot thickens. So let's come back after these messages. Stay right there. We've got more Stacy on the Ride on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio right after this.
but who is going to decide what is on Google and what's not on Google?
Who decides what the New York Times can put out there?
That's
It's in the law.
Democracy. And if our democracy and Republican form of government is undermined by disinformation campaigns, like you say, then there isn't going to be a free press. So the media needs to think about the very institutions of democracy and how we can shore them up.
Well,
if we want to keep this system of government, like Abraham Lincoln said.
To undermine our democracy.
And by the way, guess what? Guess what? It goes back to money. Why doesn't Kamala Harris want to come on our show? And we're so glad she did. But why wasn't she aggressively going after Facebook and Twitter and tech companies? Because she represents them. She's in California. She represents them. And if she's going to run for president, this, by the way, applies to everybody running for president, not just her. You're not going to want to cross Facebook. You're not going to want to cross Twitter.
I don't think she'll have a problem.
You're not going to want to face Google. Yes, you will. Okay. Don't kid yourself. They all will. They all will have a trouble. And that's where we stand. I want to ask you before we go, Rick.
I think Mika was trying to say something there. What were you saying, Mika?
No, I just don't think Kamala Harris will have a hard time crossing Facebook and these companies when she is across the table from them. I think she's trying to work with them, which is why she wasn't strong on the show
I'm
yesterday.
curious, did your earpiece go out? Did you not hear her say that before? I knew she was trying to say something, and she said it, and then I followed up. Hey, Alex? Alex?
Yeah.
Hey, is Rick's earpiece working?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, good. Thank God. So I can go to my next question to you. Before we go, Rick, I just have to ask you, and I'm worried about your earpiece because I want you to hear this next question.
So welcome back to the show, everybody. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. That's actually some audio that we listened to in the last segment. Right now, I want to kick it into audio clip number 2. Byron York, FISA warrant allows FBI to break into your home and plant electronic devices. And I want to get into a conversation about this kind of breaking information that we actually don't have the right to maintain our own residences and be informed when they want to come in and access, which is, this is a constitutionally protected right not to have our homes searched and seized without first being notified that the government's going to do that. It's clip 2.
I've heard him referred to on network television as a known Russian agent.
A known Russian agent. Now, this is the stuff that drives me crazy.
That. But you raised a really interesting idea about what is his status with the Mueller investigation. Because he is one of, if there is collusion, he's a really important part of this. Papadopoulos was the other person who was very important of this. He was not charged with any crime relating to a criminal conspiracy. He simply was charged with lying to the FBI. Now, what's the deal with Carter Page? He hasn't been charged with anything? Are they contemplating charging him with anything? And if they don't, where is the collusion?
Molly, this is what the federal government can do. And this is, again, in the angle I did before he came on. Liberals used to care about civil liberties. I mean, those comments from Blumenthal, the FISA court, the abuses of the FISA court, you don't know what they're doing. They can spy on Americans. And here we have that happen starting in October after he left the Trump campaign.
Okay, so first of all, how can this be? I understand that there are parts of the government that we don't know, but how can this be? This is very concerning. So first of all, I just shared that that's Byron York. He's on, so he's a DC Examiner political correspondent, Byron York. You've seen him on television a lot. He's a frequent fixture on the Sunday shows. He's an expert. So he's coming with some credibility here. You've got him weighing in on Laura Ingram's interview with Carter Page. So he's talking to Laura Ingram, and he says that he's heard Carter Page referred to on network television as a known Russian agent. Now, if we knew, if the government, let's not say we, like us regular people here, but if the government knew he was a Russian agent, how would he then be able to go on television at night and go on the shows and talk about this kind of stuff? Like, how is he roaming about the country freely if on the same shows that he goes on, they're referring to him as a known Russian agent? Aren't known Russian agents surveilled? Aren't they prevented from going on national television and peddling what would then be propaganda? So it's crazy for the shows to be saying that Carter Page is a known agent. He is not. Now, he has been under investigation, But he is not. It is not an accepted truth that he is a known Russian agent. That's number one. So Byron York then goes in and starts talking about this interesting idea about what his status with the Mueller investigation is, because if there was collusion, he's a really important part of this. But remember, what we know is that Carter Page was a, low-level advisor on the Trump campaign. We know who the main players were, and Carter Page wasn't one of them. So remember, it is hard for me. I'm still soaking it in. I'm still absorbing the fact that last week I sat across the table from Kellyanne Conway and we talked, and then afterwards we just shared information. Like, I asked her about her kids and she asked me about my kids. Like, that's still soaking into me. But it's hard for me to believe that that person that I met last week would say, yeah, we know this guy has a lot of Russian contacts and he's a tertiary advisor, meaning he advises like when nobody else has any advice to give, when there's nothing else going on, when there's absolutely no other campaign events or things to plan or anything, then he comes in and gives a little advice on something that's low level and matters not much at all. That person I met last week, she was like, yeah, we know he's a known Russian agent, but let's bring him into the campaign anyway. Yeah, I'm not buying it. Sorry, I'm just not buying that. So the other thing that's important to note is that Carter Page, to be a known Russian agent, has been charged with nothing. He is roaming around the country as free as Hillary Clinton. He's been charged with nothing. So if they know he's a Russian agent, that means they know he's spying. Spying is illegal. He would be in cuffs. He'd be someplace where he couldn't have access to remote cameras so he could go on TV. Do you see how we're all getting played here? If you watch TV and you buy this stuff, we're getting played. So he's not been charged. He has been charged with lying to the FBI. So what's the deal with him? And then, so Byron York says, no, he hasn't been. He hasn't been charged with anything. They aren't contemplating charging him with anything. And so if they don't charge him with anything after investigating him for collusion, then henceforth, was there any collusion? Not a lawyer, don't play one on TV. But clearly, logic says if they're investigating him for collusion and they don't charge him with anything, then they probably haven't found any collusion. Let's keep going. So then she goes on and she pivots over to Molly Hemingway, who's in, they're both on the program together. Byron York of the DC Examiner and Molly Hemingway of like basically everywhere. She's everywhere. So let's listen to that piece now. We've got her talking about the FISA, the whole FISA thing that we've got going on. It's number 3.
And this is foundational to our understanding of what it means to be American, that the federal government cannot deprive you of life, liberty, property. They can't arrest you or spy on you without a really good reason. And if the civil rights and civil liberties of Carter Page can be violated, they can be violated for anyone. And that's why it's very important that we can trust these courts, particularly because the target of the investigation doesn't get the chance to plead his own case. So we rely on the government to make sure that they provide all the information that is key.
We should point out that the warrant, it's often pointed out that, well, they didn't put the warrant on him until after he left the campaign. But that not only gets his phone calls going forward, it gets all of his email going backward, back when he was in the campaign. Plus, it allows the FBI to break into his home, search it, and plant electronics when he is not there.
And potentially other locations. I mean, if they identify other locations, they could have surveilled other places.
I mean, I'm saying it's ironic we're talking about Russia when we do this in the United States of America. I mean, Russia. What are we doing to our own people?
So, great question. What are we doing to our own people? What exactly are we okay with here? You've got all of these different people, all of these different players in the Trump campaign world. And so through this FISA warrant, and we still don't know the extent of what kind of surveillance was utilized here. We don't know how much or how many of these people were surveilled. What we do know is that if they found anything, they would have already leveled indictments against these people. And so what's most interesting to me about it is that everyone has said over and over and over again that the president is dirty. He's a horrible businessman. He does this. He does that. He's a dirty person. He's a horrible man. He's a horrible husband. Horrible this, horrible that. He's got horrible shoes, horrible face. He eats horrible things. Just horrible, horrible, horrible. Yet all of this surveillance, we're talking about metadata for days, access to his email server, all the conversations in Trump Tower, which coincidentally, he doesn't just work there, he lives there. So they got to hear his conversations with Melania, anything that happened within range of the things that they were permitted to surveil. And we still don't have anything a year into the presidency of Donald Trump. You're telling me they did all that listening and they had 4 renewals, 1 approval and 4 renewals of the FISA warrant, the warrantless search, the ability to read all of his emails, and they still don't have anything? They don't have Ivanka. They don't have Jared. They don't have Don Jr. They don't have the younger kid, Barron. They got nobody. I guess Barron's not cheating on his homework. None of the others are doing anything untoward in their business world. Where is the dirt? Where's the proof that these people are as horrible as the Democrats say they are? I mean, I have been waiting for the shoe to drop. Not that I think they're guilty, but that they're basically listening to everything on these people. They've got them coming and going, everything they say. The only thing they don't have access to at this point is their thoughts. And the Democrats are making that stuff up as they go along to just in case. And still nothing? Still no indictments, no arrest warrants, nothing. So at this point, we're slowly dragging ourselves around to a place where now you've got the president who may possibly have a request to come and speak with FBI Director Mueller. And that brings us to kind of what would a good lawyer tell him to do? Again, I'm not an attorney, but we've had legal representation before. And I know one of the things that they do as a part of you retaining them is they're supposed to protect you from yourself. They're supposed to protect you from you going into a situation in which you cannot win. And you basically, even if you're telling the truth, endangering yourself because of what you don't know. So the president doesn't actually know everything that they have, that they've listened to, that they've done, because the FISA process is a secret court. So he doesn't even have the benefit. Most of the times when you've been alleged to have committed a crime and they charge you, they then have discovery where your attorney can say to the prosecuting attorney, give us what you have on my client. And they have to send over everything they've got. They don't have to send over the concrete evidence, blood samples, anything like that, but they have to send over the reports. We found your client's hair and skin and nails underneath the fingernails of the victim or at the crime scene, or we found your client's fingerprints at the crime scene. We found the victim's clothing in the trunk of your client's car, whatever it is, whatever kind of case it is, forensic evidence that they can find when they search computers, whatever. They have to tell you what they've got, because in this country, under due process, you have a right to not only know who your accuser is, you have a right to understand the evidence they have against you so that you can mount a defense for yourself. You're innocent until proven guilty. So that's the normal process. But we're talking about the FISA court here, where you have the president going into an interview with FBI or with Special Prosecutor Mueller, where he's going to go in and he hasn't been apprised of what it is that they have. He's not been told what they know. He's just supposed to walk in there blind and sit down and answer questions, which these questions could range from anything, because as we are now learning, they could have been listening to all of his conversations with his wife when they were talking about the Super Bowl party they just threw on Sunday night at Mar-a-Lago. So why would the president meet with him? Why would he go and sit down and have a conversation with him? He knows he's not guilty of collusion. What's the point of endangering himself? This is just some strange juju we got going on right here. All right, when we get back, we're going to have our next guest. So stay right there. More Stacy on the Right up next.
If you like trips where you have to plan everything, then maybe our tour is not for you. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman with American Family Association and American Family Radio. Of course, I'm talking about our spiritual heritage tours of Washington, D.C., Mount Vernon, and then a separate trip to Williamsburg, Virginia. And guess what? We take care of everything. All you have to do is, as they say, show up. But we take these spiritual heritage tours twice a year, once in June and once in September. Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation, who is a historian, will be joining us for both tours.
We are the colors outside of the lines, and we paint a picture so one of a kind. Attention, we call attention. Our mission, redirect attention.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm a little amateur graphic artist type chick. So you guys are going to get some super cool new slideshow stuff. We're working on that. We're always working on new stuff for you guys. I hope you know that. We are into this thing, this whole radio thing, the show, the Facebook live stream, the YouTube stream, the app, the callers, the guests. We're into this thing. And I have to say, if you're not telling other people about what we're doing here at Urban Family Communications, you're missing out on an opportunity to spread the message that we have here. Christian conservative talk, and also preaching and teaching. Some of the best you're going to get anywhere. And the only place you're going to get this mix of hosts and this mix of everything that you're getting, with just the politics, the interviews, all that cool stuff, you're only getting that on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. So don't forget to share it and tell other people. If they ask you what's your favorite thing you're listening to right now, what podcast you're into, what are you into right now, share us. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them that you like our stuff. It doesn't mean you only like our stuff. There's other great stuff out there, but certainly, you know, give us your support by telling other people about what we're doing here so that we can spread out what we're doing, because it's a lot of work and we love what we do, but we would love to have you join in and sharing what we're doing here. So take note of our newest little addition to the stuff that I got going on back here. I like feedback. Tell me what you think about this. We got our little Urban Family Communications thing going on right there. Yeah, Yeah, it's going to be cool. So right now, I want to welcome our next guest onto the program. We are going to be talking right now with Jeremiah Poff, contributor to the College Fix and Red Alert Politics. Jeremiah, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's get into this. The conservative college, you went to one?
So I'm currently a student at Franciscan University of Steubenville. It's a small Catholic university in the Ohio Valley, very, very conservative compared to, the UC Berkeley's of the world. It's very different environment for sure.
Okay, so first of all, let's we have a whole lot to unpack here in our segment. I'm just going to warn you, Jeremiah. I got a lot of questions for you because we have a child who is a senior this year. We're looking at colleges. We have some smaller conservative Christian colleges that we're looking at, and then a couple of state schools. And there's a huge difference in even the application. When you're going down the application, the bigger state schools are like, so what gender do you prefer? What pronouns do you prefer? And there are a lot of different avenues where you can see they're ideologically, they're right in the middle of the culture war. And the Christian colleges just have kind of something that looks similar to what I had when I was applying, which is they just want to know who you are, where you live, what your grades were, that type of stuff. Is that what you're finding going to a conservative college?
Yeah, so when I applied, I think 3 years ago, I encountered that they wanted to know about me, why I wanted to go there, and what my grades were and my SAT scores, and that was about it. And it wasn't anything like, how I identified, what my political ideology was. They didn't care about that. They just wanted me to come there to be a student, to learn, and not worry about, what special interest group I fit into.
So let's talk a little bit about Franciscan University of Steubenville. How many students undergrad do you guys have on your campus?
We have around 2,000, a little more than 2,000. It's relatively small, and that's combined with commuter and resident students as well. And then we have around 400 graduate students or so. So about 2,700 total.
Okay, and then in a small environment like that, because we've had both kind of experiences for high school, sometimes a small environment can mean that it's almost too small. Everyone knows each other. There are very few friend groups to get into. How have you found attending a college with just 2,000 students? Has that been great? Has it been middle? Has it been not so great?
So I've enjoyed it. I think that it really, what it does is that it creates, when you know a lot of people, you don't know everyone. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration. I mean, I know a fair amount of people here, but not everyone. Mm-hmm. And the people that I've formed like the tightest bond with, I think really the small environment has helped that, because it's easier to find people. You don't have to walk 30 minutes to go to class. We all live on the same floor of the dorm, and the community environment is much more more like a family than it is okay, we live here, go to class, go back to your room, and go eat at the cafeteria, and then you never see the same people twice in a day. And I really connect with that, and I think that it's important to surround yourself with people who share your similar interests and values, and it's much easier to do that when you're in an environment where people have those same values as you do, and you may not be friends with everyone, but you can find the people that you're going to connect with most a little easier, I think, if that makes sense.
Okay, so what would you say to people, because I've had this experience in friend groups, and I've also heard other people say this in my presence to other people, which is, well, you're talking about a small school. This isn't a ranked university. How do you expect this person to come out and compete in the American corporate world coming from a small institution? Now, I tend to think that is bunk, and that is someone who is more concerned with status than they are with actually getting a good education. But what do you think about that kind of assertion that you have to go to a ranked school? These smaller schools can't prepare you.
I think it's incredibly arrogant. I think that people really... what I love about the education that I've received here is that, and I talked about this in my piece for Red Alert in the Washington Examiner, about how you really learn how to think and how to analyze just life in general with a critical eye instead of the typical, always think critically. You want to analyze your beliefs, you want to reinforce them, and you want to question things because that's how you learn. And I think that that is, I think, way more valuable than going to, Harvard or Yale, who, they have the top professors in biology and whatever, but they don't have the desire to teach you how to learn, and not so much, and instead of basically shoving information into your head. And I think that really is what's the most important thing in preparing for a student for a career in the world. And really, for someone who says that you have to go to those places, the Harvards and the Yales and of the world, that you need, that it doesn't fit into what our society, I mean, it definitely fits into what our society expects nowadays, in the sense that we have this notion that you have to go to these places. But I think that people don't realize that you can do a lot from going to a place as small as this. And a congressman has graduated from Franciscan. We've had people in major corporations. The graduates from my school have accomplished quite a bit in the world, and it's really, I think, really silly to say that you can't go to a place like this and succeed.
I'm glad to hear you articulate that, and I love the first thing you said, which was it's incredibly arrogant for someone to say that, because the assumption that we all have to go to the same type of school is the same kind of thinking that has gotten us to a place in America where many students who could be very happy owning their own business in the trades, those students are being shoehorned into college situations that they don't belong in because everyone has to go to college and everyone has to go to a ranked school, which means there aren't enough ranked schools out there for everyone to go. There aren't enough colleges for every American to attend. So it's stinking thinking. It doesn't work for the reality that we're facing as Americans.
Yeah, and I think that it's, you're seeing a decline in the number of people going to college, and I actually think that's a good thing. I think too many people go to college nowadays and end up getting a degree and thousands of dollars of debt, and then end up working at the pizza place because they can't find a job. And I think that your local electrician's making north of $100,000 a year because no one else is going into the business and he can name his price at this point. So, and I think that there's really, and a large reason for that was the fact that once the government started handing out tons of money to everyone going to college, everyone was like, now I have to go to college. But I think that the system has been unsustainable, and now people, graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and you're stuck with that for the rest of your life, and people don't want to do that, and they're recognizing that now. And I think that that's good in the long term, because I think we need people, like as you said, in the trades and starting their own business. They don't need to go to college.
Yeah, not everyone. And you also, I love the point you made about the electricians. There aren't enough of them out there. And I know this from our own personal experience. When you want something done at your house, whether it's electrical, plumbing, anything, it takes months to get someone to come out and do it because no one is learning how to lay tile. And these are actually very artistic endeavors. They're highly skilled, and although you don't need to go to college to do it, you need a certain level of training. Not any old person can come slap tile up on your wall or do plumbing, and we need people who know how to do that. So I want to talk about a little bit about, you mentioned cost, and some of the bigger schools, you're looking at $60,000, $70,000 a year. But if you have a smaller university, the costs are much more manageable. And if you were a good student, they often will award you their own personal scholarships. They're not from outside organizations; it's from the school itself. Is Franciscan that type of a place as well?
Yeah. So they give the tuition for Franciscan is around, and plus room and board, I think, is around $35,000 a year, which is much less than the 60s that you have to pay to go to USC or whatever. And I think that really is one of the draws. We were actually ranked Kiplinger's list, which is a business magazine, as one of the top college, as number 37 of the top college for value and academic excellence, like the combination of the two. And but we also, I think that we get money from our the donors of the school, provide money for scholarships, and And so everyone coming here isn't necessarily getting all their money from the government or, a private loan. The school does give out plenty of financial aid, and it's to encourage people to come here, because otherwise you can't come and you can't afford it.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. So the more I've learned about it, the more I've seen that once they realize they want you to come, there really are no limits to what they can do to kind of woo you in. But they have parameters that you have to meet first. You need a certain ACT score, you need a certain GPA, and then you have to come out and meet them. So once they've met you and they see the real person and, a parent or two, then they're like, oh, okay, this is a person that we might want to get to know a little better. And so they keep inviting you out to kind of, it's like they're basically like, let's meet her one more time. Let's see her one more time. Let's see him and, listen to him talk about this, or let him hear us talk about campus life, so that they can get a better understanding of whether or not it's a good fit. I don't know that the bigger schools do that. They have not. So our daughter applied to a couple of larger schools. They just sent out, you're admitted. Here's what financial aid you can get, which is mostly loans, no actual awards. The smaller schools are like, well, your grades qualify you for this amount straight off the top. This is a scholarship we're offering you. But if you'd like to compete for more, you can come to this special day, spend the day with us. Your parents can attend meetings, and we'll interview you, and you can earn more money. It's a completely different process. The bigger the school is, the less they seem like they need to know who you are before you come in.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed when I was applying for the school and when I was in high school was that how my admissions counselor would call me like once a month to check in on me, see how my grades were doing, see how my application was going, letting me know about financial aid and options and what they were starting to consider giving me and things like that. And it was a much more like personal experience tailored to me rather than what, as you said, you're in, congratulations, go fill out your FAFSA, get some student loans.
Right.
It wasn't like that at all. And even as a student, I went into the financial aid office, and because my financial situation had changed, and they were like, okay, well we're going to give you some more money, and you can, granted you're going to have to pull out some loans, but now like their understanding of their desire to keep you here is very very special to them. Like it makes the experience, like as I said earlier, like a family. Like you really feel like you belong. Instead of, you're out in 4 years and you don't really have anything other than 30-minute bus rides to class.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're having a chance to expose this, because I if anything that people are going to take away from this interview, because you're very accomplished, so this isn't a situation where you couldn't apply to different schools. This was a choice that you made based on what you wanted out of the college experience. And I want to make that clear to the listeners. Jeremiah is a student at Franciscan University. He's fluent in Spanish. He writes for the College Fix, studying journalism and human life studies. He's also a part of Red Alert Politics. He's doing all this while he's in college. So, this is an active person who is accomplished, who could have gone pretty much anywhere but chose a smaller institution. And so I guess as we're closing things out, what would you say to parents who are looking at both and they're not sure if they want to do the smaller environment? What would you say? You have about like a little less than a minute left.
Well, I think they need to think about well-rounded education isn't just about going to college and learning how to, if you're going to engineering school, just learning how to be an engineer. I think part of it is, as I said earlier, and I talked about in my piece, you need to learn how to learn in a advanced sense, and you question your personal beliefs and reinforce them. Too many people are taught,
20 seconds.
Fed what your parents taught, and you don't really understand why you believe it, and then when you go to college, you're told a whole other thing, and then your vision completely changes because of that. But
well, we're out of time, but thank you, Jeremiah, so much for coming on today. We'll be back with more right after this.
What does it take to live an uncommon
linked to Russia. You have a campaign who hired a law firm, who hired Fusion GPS, who hired a foreign agent who went and got information from the Russians on the other campaign. It seems like the counterintelligence investigation should have been opened up against the Hillary campaign when they got a hold of the dossier. But that didn't happen either. So, and you mentioned Senator Grassley. I will have to tell you, Senator Grassley's done a phenomenal job here, Sean. I mean, a lot of people have given myself and my committee a lot of credit for the work that we've dug up. But I can tell you that Senator Grassley has been phenomenal through this whole process, and I think he deserves a lot of credit.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Call lines are open, 866-963-2037. Head over to urbanfamilytalk.com. Take the poll questions, read the articles, enjoy your time over there. We do a lot of work to keep the website updated, and we're going to be really, really excited to have you there and have you hit the subscribe button and all that stuff. So urbanfamilytalk.com and also afr.net, really great website over there as well. The Stand blog is located there. Great place, great content, great writing. Also, some of our hosts from here right over there. So you're going to get some good stuff there. I'm still kind of at a loss about this whole thing. And so that was Nunez saying that a counterintelligence probe should have been opened up against the Clintons over the dossier because the Russians were involved in that tangled web. Remember, Steele went over to Russia and got information from them with which to compile the dossier. And so some of the stuff they claim, it's true. Some of it they claim is spurious. They're not so sure. All of it, in my opinion, really hinges upon what we hear people who know everything, who've seen everything, what they say, because we're not able to see anything and we're not able to know anything firsthand. And I'm sorry, but I just don't really trust the Democrats on this. They have a lot of competing interests here. And they don't want to lose. And their interest in not losing is much greater than their desire for the truth. And I think that's disturbing. And so I want to pivot over. I want to get into this piece over at The Last Refuge, where they talk about how in March of 2016, Carter Page was an FBI employee. And in October of 2016, the FBI told the FISA court he's a spy. And then I want to wrap up the show today. I want to talk about our responsibility as parents. So you got this really wonderful piece by Jeremiah Poff, which, by the way, I just tweeted it out. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, I mean, how could you? You just found out he was going to be on the show yesterday. If you would like to read that piece and kind of get an understanding of what he's talking about at his university, and you don't have to be Catholic to support what he's saying, which is, make the choice that's right for you. We're going to get into our responsibility as parents, as Christians, and what the Bible calls for us to do when it comes to our kids' education. And this is hard because we have competing pressures, but I'm going to talk about that. And I'm hoping that as the end of the show for today, we'll leave the show feeling empowered to be obedient to what God wants us to do for these kids, because it's so important that we not get caught up in what other people feel like what they think is best or what they know is best for us. There's only one source, and so we're gonna point to that at the end of the show. But first, let's finish wrapping up here. So as we've mentioned, and we've woven this throughout the program today, and it's kind of bringing us to here, where in 2013, Carter Page was working as an undercover employee, which the acronym for that for the government is UCE, of the FBI, helping them to build a case against Evgeny Buryakov. In March of 2016, Carter Page remained their informant pre-trial, leading to a plea of guilty from Buryakov. So his mission was to help them ensnare this Russian, and that's what he did. So you have to kind of then go from there to how do you get from this guy being an undercover spook for them, for the FBI, to some guy who they think is doing some terrorism, or not terrorism, spying, right? So doing some spying. So in 2013, the U.S. DOJ Southern District of New York announced an indictment against a Russian operative, Evgeny Buryakov. In March of 2016, so 3 years later, Buryakov pled guilty. Preet Bharara, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and John P. Carlin, Assistant Attorney General for National Security, announced that Evgeny Baryakov, a.k.a. Zhenya, pled guilty today to conspiring to act in the United States as an agent of the Russian Federation without providing prior notice to the AG. The FBI obtained the recordings of Sporzhev attempting to recruit an FBI undercover employee who is designated within this filing as UCE1, who was posing as an analyst from a New York-based energy company. In response to requests from Sporzhev, UCE1 provided him with binders containing purported industry analysis written by UCE1 and supporting documentation relating to UCE1's reports, as well as covertly placed recording devices. So in 2016, Reuters published an article based on the ongoing court case going into detail about court records and how the FBI built their case. Reuters also described the FBI UCE1 undercover employee 1, Carter Page, with strong detail. So according to prosecutors in April of 2012, and this is per Reuters, Sporzhev met an undercover FBI employee posing as an analyst at a New York energy firm at an oil and gas industry conference. Over the next 2 years, they met to discuss the industry and other economic and political issues. Prosecutors said with Sporzhev providing gifts and cash for information. So that's how they got this guy on the hook, okay? So in 2013, the FBI employee began providing Sporzhev with the binders containing purported industry analysis. It's not real analysis, he wrote it. Supporting documents and covertly placed recording devices. So in April of 2017, writing a story about Carter Page trying to affirm the Russian narrative, the New York Times outlined Carter Page's connections to the Trump campaign. He's a volunteer, okay? So remember, we know all of the paid portions of the Trump campaign. We know them because they have been highlighted in such detail by the Democrats, and also because they were obviously the paid portions because they had named positions and they were on all of the materials, the websites, all the stuff like that. Then you have this guy. He's a volunteer analyst, if you will, or advisor. So the New York Times wanted to connect Page to the Trump campaign, but during the same story, the New York Times also references Page's prior connection to the Baryakov case. So if you ignore the narrative, you discover the UCE1 description is Carter Page. Russian intelligence operatives tried in 2013 to recruit an American businessman, an eventual foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, who is now part of the FBI investigation into Russia's interference into the American election. Do you see how they jumped there? So they leapfrog from this guy who is an actual Russian agent, undercover spy for the Russian Federation, who was ensnared by an undercover agent, Carter Page, working on behalf of our government because they knew dude was a spy. So they set out to get basically offer him what he's looking for so he would pay for it and incriminate himself. They were successfully able to do this, and Carter Page was the one who did the stuff on behalf of his employers, the FBI. But because he said he would advise the presidential campaign of Donald Trump, he goes from being their employee to a suspect of Russian collusion. But where is the collusion if the FBI knew the whole time that he was working to ensnare this Russian? How is it collusion? How does it impact the presidential campaign of Donald Trump? So let's go on. You've got the businessman, Carter Page, UCE1, meeting with one of 3 Russians who were eventually charged with being undeclared officers with Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, known as the SVR. The FBI interviewed Mr. Page in 2013 as a part of the investigation into the spy ring, but decided he had not known the man was a spy, and the Bureau then never accused Mr. Page of wrongdoing. One more time. The FBI interviewed Mr. Page in 2013 because he met with these 3 Russians while he was undercover seeking to ensnare the guy that they eventually got for being a Russian spy. He meets with these 3 other guys one time. Then the FBI interviews him in 2013 because they're looking and investigating this spy ring, which is not a part of his undercover work. They decide he didn't know that the guy was a spy, and therefore they don't accuse him of any wrongdoing. So the court documents say that Mr. Page, who founded an investment company in New York called Global Energy Capital, provided documents about the energy business to one of the Russians. Isn't that what he was supposed to do? To record their conversations, the FBI inserted a listening device into binders that were passed to the Russian intelligence operatives during the energy conference, according to the former United States intelligence official. So if you read the Times article from 2017 against the backdrop of the Reuters article from 2016 and the DOJ release in 2016, it is transparently clear that Carter Page was the undercover employee UCE1 in the FBI's 2013 case. Carter Page was working for the FBI. Page was the analyst from a New York-based energy company who began providing Sporshev with the binders that were coincidentally filled with FBI listening devices. However, in 2017, the New York Times, using information from a former intelligence official, conflates the FBI-Page relationship. The New York Times basically tries to entirely change the relationship between Carter Page and the FBI. Why did the New York Times do that in 2017? Because at that point, they knew that Carter Page, after he completed his work with the FBI, worked as a volunteer advisor to the Trump campaign. And they felt they could link these things together because, remember, they were told to do so. We now know that Hillary Clinton told all of the minions on the DNC side and all of their media people, Trump won the election. Now we need to put him down for Russian collusion. We need to prevent him from serving his first term. He's been elected, but he won't be there for long. We even know that John Kerry told foreigners that don't worry about dealing. He told the Iranians, don't worry about dealing with President Trump. He won't be there for long. This is why Monica Crowley described this as something worse than Watergate. This is why everyone is so upset. If you're not upset, I encourage you to go to theconservativetreehouse.com and read what's there with an eye towards understanding what they're putting forward. Click the links, do the background, get an understanding of what is happening here. It doesn't take long. We're talking about maybe a half an hour to an hour of your time for you to understand why this is a major story that we're going to be talking about and referring back to for years. Historians are going to highlight this time as either a time when America decided we are the rule of law, no one is above prosecution, we will not have our agencies weaponized, or a time where we completely decouple ourselves from that idea and open the door to any incoming presidential administration being surveilled and treated as if they're agents of a foreign entity simply because they won an election. Now, that took a bit longer than I thought. And we can kind of weave back in and out of this topic with the colleges and everything. And you know how it is when you're going through something yourself, it's top of mind for you. And so it is for us. And we really have, we've prayed and we've settled in on our kind of decision making. And we've allowed our child to be our young adult to be the lead on this, on where she wants to go to college. And I feel like that's appropriate. My husband and I feel like that's very appropriate. You, as a parent, don't want to be choosing the place where your child is going to college for them. They need to be the lead on that decision. That being said, her interest has never been to kind of, well, I'm going to go to this school because it's prestigious, or I'm going to go to this school because it's big this or big that. It's been what school fits my personality type, what environment would give me the best chance of doing well and interfacing with my teachers and having good relationships. And so I want to kind of point us back to the reason for all of it, which is Jesus and what we've been given as parents, this amazing opportunity to guide these arrows out of our household. And so I love what Jeremiah said. It's incredibly arrogant to treat this decision as if it's something that it can satisfy a status symbol for us. There is no other status for us as Christians other than that we belong to Christ. And these children that we have, they belong to him as well. So please prayerfully consider how much more important it is for us to preserve their Christian foundation and their morals than it is to have status symbols for where they went to college. That's the show for today. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be back with you tomorrow with more Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. God bless.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of